Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, February 1st, 2024. I am thrilled to be with you tonight, and I'm grateful to every one of you for taking the time so that we can study together. The beginning of our Torah portion, the Parsha of Yitro, begins with a narrative where Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, comes to visit, and he wants to watch his son-in-law at work. Vayeshev Moshe lishpot es ha'am, vayamod ha'am al Moshe min haboker ad ha'arav. He sees that Moshe is sitting and judging the people, adjudicating between disputes and answering questions, and people are in line waiting for him from morning till night. So his father-in-law says to him, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And Moshe says, well, people come to me to ask, to resolve disputes, to ask questions. What does God want from us? And they come to me, and I tell them what they should do. V'hodati es chukei ha'elakim v'es torasav. I teach them God's laws. They want to know, and I teach them. So Yitro says to his son-in-law, no. Lo tov hadavar asher ato oseh. This is not good the way you set this up. Novol tibol. You're going to get worn out. They're going to get worn out. You should listen to me. Ata shma b'koli. Listen to my advice. And you need to appoint judges that will be lower judges, and they'll take care of most of the easy questions, and the difficult questions will come to you. But I want to focus more precisely on Yitro's words. So when you do this, what you should be able to do is, V'izartes hem es hachukim v'es hatoros. You should warn them concerning the laws and the commandments. So that's the same that Moshe said, V'odati es chukei elakim, I teach them the laws. So Yitro is saying, you should teach them about the laws. But then Yitro adds something. V'hodata lehem es haderech asher yelkobo. And you should show them the way in which they should go, v'es hamasa asher yasun, and the actions that you should perform. Now that's extra. That wasn't part of what Moshe said he was doing. Yitro is saying, you need to do that, but you also need to do something else. Included in these words, show them the way they should go and the actions that they should perform. And the passage ends, Vayishma Moshe lekol chosno, vayas kol asher omar. Moshe listened to what his father-in-law said, and he did all that Yitro suggested. Moshe accepted everything that Yitro said. But we need to understand, what is it that Yitro added? And the Talmud picks up on this. And the Talmud says what Yitro added is, Moshe said, my job is to teach the laws. And Yitro said, no, you have to teach something else also. You have to teach that people should do lifnim mishuras hadin, to do more than the law actually requires. Again, Yitro is going further than Moshe in what Moshe's job should be. According to Yitro, Moshe needs to provide not only the correct answer to the question before him, in a question of a dispute, who's right and who's wrong, or in a question that's being asked, what is the correct answer? Moshe needs to do that, yes, but Moshe needs to go beyond that to address the feeling and the sensitivity of the person before him. Earlier this week, we spoke about an incredible essay based on a lecture by Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the Rav, where he says that a dayan, a Jewish judge, of course, Moshe is the model, the first and the model of what a Jewish judge should be. A dayan must not only be a magistrate, but also a teacher and a healer. Someone comes before a judge, a Jewish judge, they should expect not only to receive the correct answer, they should also expect to be heard, to be understood, to be responded to in a way that heals them, in addition to providing the answer. This is the mark of our greatest Torah leaders that have a vast and deep knowledge of Torah and the world, plus an innate desire, when faced with a question or a dispute, not only to answer correctly, but to heal, to raise up the person before them. One of the greatest authorities in Jewish law in our times is Rabbi Herschel Schachter, who lives in New York. I have quoted him many times to you before. He has a firm expertise on every area of Jewish law. He has the humility to learn from everyone, including every expert whose wisdom is required to answer difficult modern questions. And he has a deep, deep feeling for the sensitivity of every individual and the need for his words to bring not only truth, but healing and encouragement. So this is just one example of hundreds, thousands. Just one example. In Jewish law, for a couple to be married, the groom gives an object of value to the bride accepts it, and does that in the presence of two witnesses, and that's what makes them married according to Jewish law. Now, the universal custom is to use a ring. The groom places a ring on the finger of the bride. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be a ring. I mean, that's the custom, but it doesn't have to be a ring. It could be any object. Any object. Actually, there are some Jewish communities that have the custom to use different objects. There are some Sephardic communities that have the custom to use a coin. Okay. It's almost universal to use a ring, but according to the law, anything works. So here's the story that happened. This is a true story. There's a man who lived not near a Jewish community. Jewish man, married to a Jewish woman with a family, children. And he was gradually learning a little bit more about Judaism from his local rabbi. And he learned from his local rabbi that in order for a Jewish wedding to be valid, I mentioned before they have to be two witnesses, but the two witnesses are not allowed to be related to each other or to either the bride or the groom in any way. And when this man learned from his rabbi this rule, he was very worried because he thought back to his own wedding many, many years earlier, and he remembered that it was his cousin who served as one of the two witnesses under the chuppah. And now he's worried, all these years later, maybe he's not married. Maybe he and his wife are not married. And he thought to himself, maybe it means that if the marriage is invalid, maybe it means, God forbid, our children are illegitimate. That's not true. He was making a mistake. It's not true. Even if the marriage was invalid, there would be no problem or stain on the children. But in this man's mind, he was worried. And he was going out of his mind, thinking that his whole marriage, his whole family is in trouble. Well, his local rabbi didn't know what to do, but he did know to whom to turn. His local rabbi called Rabbi Herschel Schachter and told him the story. And Rav Schachter said, here's what you should do. Tell the man that he should gather two kosher witnesses that were sure or acceptable, according to Jewish law, and he should have a tiny wedding ceremony in his house, he and his wife, the rabbi, the two witnesses, that's all. And he should take an apple from the refrigerator and he should give the apple to his bride, and he should say to her the following words, Hareat mekudeshes li, b'tapuach zu, kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. Behold, you are consecrated to me, you are married to me with this apple, according to the laws of Moses in Israel. That's what you should do. So the rabbi understood that even though there's no problem or consequence, the fact that there was an original problem with the witnesses of the wedding, but they should do the chuppah over again. Fine. But he said to Rav Schachter, why an apple? Why are you telling me to take an apple? I mean, why not just a ring? So Rav Schachter said, according to Jewish law, it can be any object. So an apple is just as valid as a ring. But it would be a good idea in this circumstance to do something that's a little bit humorous, because everyone's going to be a little nervous. You have a family, and they're a little worried, they're a little concerned, they're just becoming more religious. Now they think that they were never married before. There might be some tension, there might be some upset. Bring a little humor into it. Behold, you are married to me with this apple, according to the laws of Moses in Israel. Rabbi Herschel Schachter didn't just give the correct answer. He gave, in the form of gentle humor, healing and relief and encouragement to this Jewish family. Yitro understood this is a necessary component to have a true Torah leader address every aspect of the situation, not only the direct question that is asked. Vayishma Moshe lekol chosno, and Moshe listened to what Yitro said, Vayas kol asher omar, and Moshe acted in accordance with everything that Yitro said. Okay. Our Torah portion includes the Parsha of Yitro, the Aseret Dibros, the Ten Commandments. What did the Ten Commandments look like? Well, we know there were two stones, and the words of the Aseret Dibros, the words of the Ten Commandments, were engraved on the stones. What did those luchos, we call them tablets, but what did those stones look like? The Talmud says that each one was approximately 2 feet tall by 2 feet wide by 1 foot thick. That's a big stone, approximately. Now, just so you know, there is no Jewish source for the rounded top. So often when we see the Ten Commandments, an image of the Ten Commandments, it's rounded at the top. There is no Jewish source that indicates that. The only source we have in the Talmud indicates that there were rectangles. They were square, about 2 feet across, 2 feet high, and about 1 foot thick. Why were there two and not one? Rav Shamshon Hirsch says it was important to distinguish the first 5 are bein adam lamakom. They're commandments that relate between God and man. And the second 5 are between bein adam lachavero, between one person and another person. So, for example, in the first 5, you have to believe in one God, not to make graven images, to observe the Shabbos, the Sabbath, which is a mitzvah that relates between ourselves and God, honoring parents, which is a question, why is that in the first 5 and not on the second 5, but we'll leave that question for another time. And then on the second 5, don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery, etc. And Rav Hirsch explains that the reason there were 2 stones with 5 and 5 is so that you could hold them next to each other, so that you could read them. I'm trying to do it in a way that you understand what I'm saying. You could read them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if you hold them together, you could also read them across 1, 6, 2, 7, 3, 8. And there was a correspondence between 1 and 6, and 2 and 7, and 3 and 8. Now, you'd have to work out, and Rav Hirsch does work out, what's the correspondence between number 1 and number 6, number 2, number 7. Okay, you can work that out. But in other words, the 2 stones were meant to be held up side by side. Now, when you actually do that, you see something very interesting. I'm not going to hold up a representation of the 2 stones because it's too heavy. But I have it on paper. So look, please, at the Aseret Dibros, the 10 Commandments, on 2 pieces of paper, 5 on one, 5 on the other. I want to make sure you can see this. I know I'm hiding my face. Now, just as a visual image, doesn't that look a little bit strange to you? Because, we're used to an image of the 10 Commandments where it might just list 1 through 10, or it might just mention the first word of each of the 10. But when you hold it up and you consider what the 2 stones actually look like if you held them side by side, it's very odd that this one, the first 5, the text, the words, fills the whole page. The second 5 is so much more brief. So what did it look? Did it look like this? That one of them was filled with text all the way to the bottom and the other one was mostly empty space? It just sounds kind of, I don't know, it could be. It could be, it looks a little strange to me. It could be. But there's another possibility, and this is mentioned by Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon. It could be that the second 5 were written in a larger font, so that the second 5, yes, there are fewer words, but they're written bigger, so that both stones, the text, fill the entire page. Now, why would that be? Well, says Rav Matisyahu Solomon, if you look at this, as you approach, which 5 do you see first? Which side can you read first? The side that's written bigger. Perhaps this is to indicate that it is the laws between one person and another that are even more important to God than the laws between God and man. Perhaps. There's another lesson that comes from the appearance of the Luchos. The Torah says, Luchos ksuvim mishnei avrehem. The Luchos were engraved from both sides. So remember, you have a block of stone. From the front, it's engraved, and from the back, it's engraved. Mizeh umizeh ksuvim. It was written, engraved, from both sides, front and back. But our rabbis teach us that it was a miracle because the words are engraved in stone. Now just imagine this in your mind's eye, and the engraving went all the way through, and yet, miraculously, the words were visible and readable from both sides. That's impossible, right? Because if you're on this side and you engrave it all the way through, it's not going to be readable from the other side. But this was a miracle. It was a supernatural event. It's a pretty neat trick, kind of like a divine Escher drawing. But Rav Shamshon Hirsch explains that this has deep significance. He writes, "The Word of God must not grip us only superficially from one side. It must penetrate us through and through. We must be a Jew through and through, on all sides and in all aspects. Otherwise," now I'm going to use my own metaphor, "it's like polishing your furniture or waxing your car. The water beads off the surface and rolls off." And that's a problem we have in the Jewish world today. Too many of us, we are waxed. We have Jews who appear to be religious, but it's not sinking in. Rav Shamshon Hirsch refers to them as reverse Marranos. They're Jewish on the outside, but they're not really so Jewish on the inside. Jews who know the words, they do the actions, but those words and actions remain beaded on the surface. It's only a disguise, a show, a mask they wear in public, but it doesn't touch their soul. And sadly, when such a person thinks no one is watching, they can be lousy. The key to genuine spirituality is how a person acts in private when no one is watching. Because when the lessons of Judaism are absorbed, when the words go through and through, when they penetrate to the core of our being, then it doesn't matter whether we're in public or in private, because there is always one, the only one, God, who sees. And it is when there is that awareness, that's when being an outwardly religious Jew is something that is beautiful and moral and makes us proud, because it's not just on the outside, it's through and through. Picturing the writing of the Ten Commandments should be an ongoing reminder of this lesson, that the words of God must go through and through us, visible and applicable in every place and at every time. I love my job. I love Montreal. And I love this community. But there is a built-in downside to my career, and the same is true for many rabbis. I have never, as an adult, lived near my parents. I was very close with my father of blessed memory. I am very close with my mother. May she live and be well. I remain as involved in their lives as much as possible. But I don't get to spend my time geographically with my parent. And I have to confess, I am often envious especially here in Montreal, of so many people who spend their lives so geographically close to their parents. I'm envious. Now, I know firsthand how difficult it can be, especially as parents age. How frustrating at times it can be, even painful. I know about this firsthand. And I would never say this to someone who is going through that, because I know how painful it could be. But I'm envious to be able to see and to care for a parent in person on a daily or close to daily basis. I don't have that. So I want to tell you a story. This is a true story I heard from Rabbi Meilech Biderman. It happened recently to a man who lives in Ashdod, in Israel. A wonderful, wonderful man. His name is Rabbi Mordechai Moskowitz. He's a righteous man, a scholarly man, wonderful person. Nebuch, a few weeks ago, his wife passed away. She lived a full life, raised a beautiful family, spent most of her time helping others. Nebuch, may her neshama have an aliyah, and may Mr. Rabbi Moskowitz be comforted. During the Shiva, her doctor came to visit. Now, this doctor is a well-known specialist and expert in the illness this woman had. And this man happens to be a secular Israeli man. So he came to the Shiva, and he told her family that treating their mother and wife was for him an education in emunah, belief and trust in God, which is a pretty shocking thing for him to say, because he is a secular Jew. And he explained himself as follows. This woman, Mrs. Moskowitz, was diagnosed 4 years earlier by this doctor, who is a specialist in her illness. And he told her 4 years ago, after the tests, after the examination, he said to her, "You have 6 weeks to live. There's no treatment. Nothing will work. There's no point in even trying. 6 weeks." He showed them the scans. He showed them the images. Nothing is going to help. You have 6 weeks. He gave her some pills. No chemo, no treatment, but some pills to help with the side effects, and that's it. Now, the doctor said to her family at the Shiva, the doctor said, normally, when I have to give such news to a patient, they react with crying, with outrage, with disbelief. What do you mean, 6 weeks? That's it? There's nothing to do? And it's understandable. But he said, Mrs. Moskowitz, when she heard this terrible news, she was calm. And she said, I have insurance. The doctor said to her, what does that mean? You have insurance. So she said, Mrs. Moskowitz said, that her mother was ill, her elderly mother was ill, and lived with her and her husband, and she takes care of her elderly mother. She's extremely devoted to her elderly mother, and that is her insurance. So she has no worries. The doctor, when he heard this, laughed at her. It does not sound to me from this story that this doctor has the best bedside manner. Okay. He laughed at her, And he repeated, I'm telling you, you have 6 weeks. That's it. And this doctor told her family at her shiva she lived for another 4 years with no treatment. Just those pills he gave her for the side effects. 2 months ago, this woman's mother passed away. And 2 weeks ago, she, Mrs. Moskowitz, passed away. The doctor's diagnosis was correct. The doctor said to the family, my diagnosis was correct. She lives 6 weeks. But not 6 weeks from the diagnosis 4 years ago, but 6 weeks after her own mother passed away. 6 weeks after the term of her insurance ended. And this secular doctor said, this woman, Mrs. Moskowitz, taught me the words of Yaakov, of Jacob, that we quote in Bereshis, at the beginning of the Parsha of Vayishlach, of Vayetze, When Yaakov had the dream and he woke up from the dream, and Yaakov said, Achein yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. There is indeed a God who is here running this world. Va'anochi lo yadati. But until now I did not know. And the doctor said that about himself. There is indeed a God in this world. But until I learned this lesson from Mrs. Moskowitz, I did not know it. In this week's Torah portion, we read in the Aseret Adibros, the 10 Commandments, number 5, Kabed es avicha v'esimecha. Honor your father and your mother. L'man yarichun yamecha. In order to lengthen your days, al ha'adama asher Hashem elokecha nosein lach, upon the earth which Hashem your God has given to you. Now it's very strange that the Torah, that God should specifically make a promise like this, that if you honor your father and your mother, your days will be lengthened. Now some commentators say it lengthened in Olam Haba, in the world to come. But the pasuk says al hadama, your days upon the earth, upon the ground, the earth will be lengthened. Rabbi Simcha Bunam Alter was the 5th Ger Rebbe, a great Hasidic teacher. He wrote a work very important in the Hasidic world, Leiv Simcha. And listen to what he writes. He writes, the time a person spends on Kibbut Av V'Aim, honoring one's father and mother, does not count towards the years God grants us to live. The time we spend honoring and caring for our parents literally extends our life. Now, I'm not the Ger Rebbe, and I'm not making any promises, and I'm not giving any guarantees, and I certainly do not know how God runs this world. But I beg you, if you are blessed in a way that I am not blessed, never take it for granted. Kabed es avicha v'esimecha, l'man yarichun yomecha al ha'adama, asher Hashem elokecha nosein lach. Honor your father and your mother in order to lengthen your days upon the earth which God has given to you. My friends, I wish you a wonderful evening and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.